Hi, my name is Rachel Paxton, and today I'm here to show you how to can beef stew. What will you get out of this class? You will learn how to can beef stew. I will lead you through the process step by step. I will give you the recipe, canning supply list, and an altitude reference chart you can download and print for your future reference. You will find those in your course materials, and you will also gain the confidence you need to try more pressure canning recipes on your own. My name is Rachel Paxton. I'm a freelance writer and mom of 5 children, ages 28 to 6. This is me and my husband Dave. We've been married for 20 years, and these are 3 of our children. Zachary and Christian are twins, and they're almost 11, and Trenton is 6. We also have a 28 and a 26-year-old daughter. I have been canning for more than 20 years, and I'm also the owner of the website creativehomemaking.com. For this recipe, you're going to need a roast or stew meat, potatoes, carrots, onions, celery, beef bouillon, and salt. I haven't listed specific ingredient or amounts of ingredients here because it depends on how many quarts you want to make. I made 6 quarts of stew with this recipe, and I had a roast that was about 3 pounds. And I found that you're going to use about 1 to 2 medium potatoes per jar, 1 carrot per jar. I cut up 2 large onions for the 6 jars. I put about a stalk of celery in each jar. So you don't have to use specific amounts. In pressure canning, you'll find that you don't have to use specific amounts like you do in boiling water canning, because with the pressure canning you're cooking at a higher temperature. The rule of thumb for pressure canning is that you need to process your whatever you're cooking for the amount of time required to process the lowest acid food. So I'm not even sure which is the lowest acid food in this recipe, but whichever one that was, that's what you would go by to figure out how long to process it for. So that's why the amounts of ingredients don't matter too much as long as you process it for long enough. So I will give you the amount of time that you need to process this recipe though. You're also going to need a pressure canner, a Widemouth funnel, a jar lifter, and quart-sized canning jars. This is what a pressure canner looks like. There's 2 kinds of pressure canners, a weighted pressure canner and a dial gauge pressure canner. This one is a dial gauge, and that's what I'll show you how to use. You'll find that these are the most common ones, and they're easy to find at the store. They cost about $60. You can order them from Amazon and have it shipped right to your house with free shipping. I have included a link to it in your supply list so you can see which one I recommend. This is what the jar lifter looks like. And the Widemouth funnel is really nice. It sits very nicely in the top of your jar so that you can put liquid in your jars without spilling. All of these are linked to in your supply list. The first thing you want to do is sterilize your jars, rings, and lids. Like I said, I used 6 quart jars for this recipe. If you don't have a dishwasher, you can boil the jars in boiling water on the stove, but if you have a dishwasher, it's easier to sterilize them in the dishwasher, and they'll be all ready when you need them. If you're going to reuse old jars, that's fine. You just need to make sure to use new lids every time, but you can reuse the rings and the jars. You need to fill your canner with about 3 inches of water and start it up to boiling. Now for my beef, I used about a 3-pound roast. You can use stew meat that's already cut up, but if you have a roast or whatever you can find on sale, just chop it up into little pieces, trimming off as much fat as possible. I also chopped up carrots, celery, and onions. And if you didn't end up chopping enough, it's alright. If you find you're a little bit short later, you can always chop up some more. I peeled and chopped the potatoes. I used Yukon Gold potatoes for this recipe, but you can use any kind of potatoes. Now you're going to want to add a teaspoon of salt to each sterilized quart jar before you put anything else in the jar. Then you want to layer your ingredients in the jar. You don't have to put them in a specific order, but I put the meat I divided up the meat equally, and then the potatoes, carrots, celery, and onions. And if you find that you don't have enough to fill up your jars, just add some more of something to the jar. And either before you've done that or after you've done that, you need to heat the bouillon to a boil. You're going to need about 2 cups of liquid per jar, so I needed 12 cups of liquid. So I put 12 cups of water in a pan, and I used this beef bouillon. You can use vegetable broth, beef broth. If you have homemade beef broth, that's fine, but this is all I had this day, so I decided to use the beef bouillon and just prepare it according to the directions on the package. And after you get that to a boil, you want to fill the jars, leaving 1-inch headspace. The headspace is the amount of space between the top of the liquid and the top of the jar. It's important to have the correct amount of headspace when you're pressure canning, or your jars can explode while they're processing. The food in the jars expand when they're heated, so you need enough room to allow that. And for this recipe, you need 1-inch headspace. You then want to wipe the rims of the jars with a damp paper towel or a kitchen towel, and then place the lids and rings on the jar. The lids don't have to be super tight, just finger tight is fine. And then place the jars in the canner. After you put the jars in the canner, you want to put the lid on it and then process it at 10 pounds of pressure for 75 minutes for pints or 90 minutes for quarts. And that is for elevation 1,000 feet and below. If you live above 1,000 feet in elevation, you need to adjust the processing time for this recipe. If you live at higher elevations, it takes longer to get the water to the correct temperature. So if that's the case, just reference the altitude adjustment chart in your course materials and adjust it accordingly. But if you're at 1,000 feet or below, then you're fine. Just use these amounts of minutes to process your jars. And you'll notice that the water is not covering the jars. When you're boiling canning, you will have your water 1 inch above the jars, but that's not the case with the pressure canner. The main thing is you don't want the water to boil out of the pressure canner completely during processing. So 3 to 4 inches in the bottom of the pan will rise up to at least half of the jar, and that's totally fine. You don't need to have it above the jars. These are the parts of a pressure canner. When you put the lid on, you line up the arrows on the top so that it locks on tightly. And after you get the lid on, you're going to turn the heat up and get it boiling if it's not boiling already. The first thing you want to do is take the pressure regulator off of the vent pipe, and then you'll start seeing steam come out of the vent pipe. You want steam to come out of the vent pipe for about 10 minutes before you start building the pressure in the pressure canner. So after the 10 minutes is up, you want to put the pressure regulator back on the vent pipe, and then the pan will start to build pressure. When the pressure is built, the lid lock, which is flush with the lid right now, will pop up, and you'll know that there's pressure in the pan. And then you'll start seeing the dial gauge go up. So the dial gauge will start going up, and when it gets to 10, you want to start turning your temperature down. You're going to end up starting it on high, but then turning it down between low and medium low to keep the pressure at a constant temperature. You want it to be right at 10 or 11, but not a lot higher than that, and definitely not lower than that. If it drops below 10 while you're processing, you're going to have to start the time over again. So you want to keep it at 10 or just a little above, and just make sure you turn the temperature down, because if you don't, it will go way above 10 and get way too hot. So watch it, and then once it gets to a constant temperature, it will stay right about 10, and you won't have to watch it the whole time. So for this recipe, you want 10 pounds of pressure. When it gets to 10, you start the timer and then let it go until the time is up. When the time is up, don't take the lid off. You need to let the pressure release first. So all you need to do is turn the stove off. Don't move the pan or open the lid. Just let it sit there, and it will take about 20 minutes or so for the pressure to release out of the pan. You'll hear the air escaping out of the vent pipe. And so just let it sit there until the lid lock goes back down again. And when it goes down, you'll know that the pressure is out of the pan. And then I would wait another 10 or 15 minutes or so before you remove the lid. And then it'll be safe to open, and you'll be able to remove your jars at that point. Just a note about ceramic stoves. It is not usually recommended to do pressure canning on ceramic stoves. You want to check with the manufacturer of your stove. It is possible for the ceramic stove top to break under too high of a temperature. I have tried to pressure can on a ceramic stove before, and what I found was that the temperature fluctuated in the stove too much. The ceramic stove top, the heat goes up and down to regulate the temperature on the stove, and that will also make the pressure in your pressure canner go up and down too much, where it will go below the pressure that you want it to. So it's possible to do it if you stand and watch it the whole time, but you're going to have to turn the temperature up and down to get an equal temperature or pressure on your gauge, and that can be very frustrating. So you can try it, but it's not recommended. I much prefer the old-fashioned stove for canning. It just works a lot better. And you also need to be careful about scratching your ceramic stove, because pulling a heavy pan across your stove will put a scratch in it, and I've done that too. So anyway, just a word of caution: if you have a ceramic stove, just read the instructions that came with it and see if it is okay to do that or not. When you remove the jars from the canner, you want to set them on a towel on the kitchen counter. And usually the jars will seal in the canner, but it's possible they won't be sealed yet. You want to let it sit for 15 or 20 minutes, and they should have all sealed by then. If you have any that don't seal, you can put them in the refrigerator, and you can still eat them within a week or two. And if they do seal, then you can put them in a cool, dark place for 1 to 2 years. To serve the stew, you can either heat it and eat it as it is, or if you like a thicker stew, you might remove some of the liquid, stir in a couple tablespoons of cornstarch into the liquid you removed, and then return the liquid to the soup and stir it until it thickens. You might wonder if you can put the cornstarch in it before you can it, and that's not recommended. Cornstarch does not stay stable during the canning process, so you want to add this right before you're serving it, and it's no big deal. You have to heat the soup up anyway, so it doesn't take much longer to add the cornstarch to it. And I made this for dinner today, and it was really good. If you've never had pressure canned meat before, you're going to be pleasantly surprised. It's pretty cool actually that you put all the ingredients in the jars raw and it comes out cooked, and the meat will be so tender it just completely falls apart. It's very, very tender, and it has really good flavor, and we just really enjoyed it. So I'm excited that we have a bunch of beef stew to have now, and I'm excited to make some more different kinds of soups. So hope you enjoy this recipe too, and hope to see you again soon.